every single week, and we ship about 50 containers a week into Asia Pacific. So we have a lot of activity. And before that, I was with ITT Corporation, not related to ITT Tech, who's now out of business. But in '95, that was spun off. ITT Corporation is a large manufacturing company, $11 billion in sales. They've since done a three-way split. But when I was there, $11 billion in sales, 40,000 employees. And I ran a global division where we had 40% of our business in the US, 40% in Europe, 20% in Asia. I was responsible for all of our business of the corporation in China with an office in Shanghai and all of our business in India, about 300 million in China and about 100 million in India. So a complex global supply chain, everything from the world's largest brake pad manufacturer with 200 robots in one facility in Italy distributing brake pads throughout the world for BMW, Mercedes, Porsche, other high-end cars, to tiny little components that went in Apple phones called a universal connector. So a wide range of products, a lot of diverse challenges, and at the end of the day, you say, what does it all have in common? So I want to talk about a few things that supply chains can have in common. And the one thing is, as a supply chain professional, we are responsible for helping our businesses win. It's not good to retract in business. It's not good to stay still. It's good to gain market share, and it's good to grow. And when you come to a meeting, you got to have the how am I going to help this company win as your primary objective. You can't be a naysayer. You can't be saying no to things. You have to then figure out how to turn that passion into competitive advantage. I'm going to talk a little bit about markets, customers, costs, speed, teams, partners, talent, technology, and innovation. I got 3 slides. Go quickly. But I want to tell you 2 quick stories. Think of 3 words, 3 phrases first. Black curtain, ease of doing business, and wow. I believe sincerely that supply chains should function behind a black curtain. Imagine a stage with a black curtain and all the real inner workings going on behind the black curtain. The people that are getting the pleasure of the product, the experience on the other side of the curtain, they don't know all that's going on back there. Our job in supply chain is to make all that happen, create networks and solutions that happen seamlessly without visibility. And we need to do it so that people, when they're asked, say, how difficult is it to deal with that supply chain? You want to be branded as one that's easy to do business with. Your department, your function, you're part of the country, you're part of the globe. Are you easy to do business with? And then lastly, sometimes you have to ask, can I create a wow factor? Maybe you do it every day, like Amazon Fresh delivers groceries every day, and it's like, how did they do that? But sometimes it's special events where you just go over the top for a customer in addition to your backbone. So 2 quick stories. About a year ago, I had a division president, the president that runs our trucking group, call me and say, our manufacturing division president wants to ship air freight, and normally the freight is shipped by ground. I said, how much air freight? He said, a 747 and 3 757s. I said, what? Long story short, product issue in one plant on the East Coast, had to pull the inventory out of all the distribution centers. The recovery was to ship it from the West Coast. The only way to get it there and not be out of stock was to send it that night for the next day delivery. Made a few phone calls, confirmed it was the right thing to do. I said, are you ready? He said, I'm ready. We said, go. Planes were on the tarmac at midnight. Pallets were loaded. Planes were full. They took off. Product was on the ground at 6 a.m. on trucks and delivered by 11 a.m. $600,000 later for product that normally would have cost about $20,000 to ship. That is a wow. Now that customer, we didn't ask their permission to do it. We just did it. And guess what? We're now in discussions with them about doubling and tripling our business because they know we have their back. Another quick example, about 2 years ago, I was in Las Vegas standing in the lobby ready to check in about noon, and some of my customers' executives came over to me. I was there for a conference that happens once every 2 years, about 3,000 people, and they invite about 100 from the outside of their key suppliers. Executives came over and said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "What?" So, well, we have some food stands that are going to be set up for tonight and tomorrow, and we wanted to use company logo napkins, and we forgot. We called Cindy, who is the operations manager at your LA facility, and said, "Can you get them to us?" And we called her at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and she missed there was no way to make the FedEx deadline. Sorry, FedEx. So she said, let me think about it, I'll get back to you. They came running up to me to say, "You're not going to believe what happened." At 10 o'clock this morning, Cindy called us to say she was halfway in a car ride with 3 cases of napkins she was delivering herself from LA to Las Vegas. Wow. So no matter how well you plan your supply chain, you have to have a culture that says, "I'm going to get what's necessary done." And I think that helps create competitive advantage. Let's talk a little bit about a few of these features. Business is not a science and it's not an art. It's a mix of art and science. There's no one formula to get things done. So one of the things you have to understand is the markets and customers you service. The way to get a brake pad through a distribution network is different than an electronic component. The way to get a medical device through a system is different than a food product. And even within a category, you have different cycle needs. So making sure you understand the cycles of your customer. An aerospace customer has a 3-year cycle, and guess what? Most of the people have the DNA in aerospace that they go slow. A consumer products company has a 1 to 2 year life cycle, and most of the people in that industry go fast. You put an aerospace person in a consumer products company, and they won't go fast enough. You put a person from electronics over in aerospace, and they say, "When is the paint going to dry?" So you have to mix your business cycle knowledge and time to market with what the segments of your business are requiring. It sounds simple, but a lot of people try to fit one solution across multiple product sets. And to do that, you need to make sure you're listening to your internal customers, because the internal customers are the path to your external customers. You have to know who it is you're trying to please and make the overall winning solution possible. There's a concept called unmet needs, and it's a hard one to get your mind. I still don't have my mind around it fully, but the simple premise is somebody can tell you what they need, but they can't tell you what's unmet a lot of times because they haven't seen it, they haven't experienced it. So part of your role in business and in supply chain is to try to find little experiments where you could meet a business problem that doesn't have a spec sheet. You're trying and you're innovating to try, and I'll talk more about innovation, to meet an unmet need. I think that many of us in supply chain think that it's better to have safety stock and reserve inventory. It's counterintuitive. Would you rather, if the daily consumption is 25 units, would you rather have 100 or 200 on hand? Most people that actually have to answer the phone and make the decision say, "I'd rather have 200. Well, the reality is velocity matters. If you can tone your supply chain to get to 100 and get to under 3 days, get the velocity going, what happens? You run a more efficient organization, you have less stuff sitting around, you have your whole vendor base tuned to that supply chain, and you've got contingencies and plans in place in case something goes wrong. That will make you a better organization, and what does that do? It helps changeovers go faster. If you have to go left, how much product do you have in that supply chain? You don't have 8 weeks. You might have 2 weeks worth of upstream through the raw materials. So your entire cycle depends on what you try to accomplish at different points in the supply chain as to how responsive you can be to the business. So get to know the business and get to think about velocity. This applies commodities, raw materials, assembly, packaging, vertical integration, non-vertical integration. Supply chain is a very complicated subject, so there's no one answer. But always think about how you can create the backbone where you're getting the high predictable items through a backbone that's repeatable, and then make room for something that's going to wow your customer. Make that an okay experience, because a lot of times supply chain says no, I can't do that. You got to get to yes. There's a couple other variables I've always found very critical. The ability to have the right team, if you're thinking about winning, teamwork is essential. And supply chain, we rely on partners, strategic partners, preferably strategic partners. The number one variable on strategic partners after you get past cost and basic boundaries of after quality and after basic boundaries of cost is there a cultural fit? Can you rely on that partner to interact with your business with the same values, the same passion that you have? You would be amazed the number of times you have non-value added activity because you don't have a cultural fit with your supply base, your partners. Work very hard. If you're going to have a culture of RFP in 5 years or you're out, you're going to get that kind of behavior. If you're going to have we're going to be a lifetime partner, you have to earn it, you have to show me productivity, we're going to work together, you're going to get that kind of partner. You have to pick the relationship that fits with your culture and make sure your supply chain is dominated by people that have that cultural fit. This next point about trust is, to me, the most powerful business principle when you think of all the way from an hourly employee up to a complex and global supply chain. Sure, we need trust when it comes to, I'm going to trust that you're not going to come steal something from me. I trust that. But the absolute most game-changing kind of trust to create high-performance teams is the trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. Why is that? Because if everybody in the supply chain organization, your own employees and your customers, do what they say they're going to do, what happens? You're not checking up on them. You're not wasting your time checking on the status of things. That's non-value added activity. So emphasize consistently to build a culture around people doing what they say they're going to do. And if they can't get it to you by Wednesday, they're calling you on Tuesday and letting you know. So you're not having your time wasted trying to figure out who do I need to ask for where the status is of what. Create mechanisms where you can build that momentum into your organization. It's very powerful. In terms of talent, we all like diversity. I think we've proven over the years that diverse workforces, diverse supplier bases bring new ideas, they bring innovation, they bring a fresh view of what consumer sets need to be addressed. And part of that diversity is young and early in career talent. And with millennials, it's obviously been talked about a lot. You've got to have 9 to 18-month rotational assignments. You've got to get them into the business. My adage is if you have a supervisor position, and let's just pick a warehouse. I've got a supervisor position in a warehouse. Traditionally, you'd go find a supervisor from another competitor who's done it for 10 years, and you know they're going to be successful, you go hire them. In today's world, you find somebody that's been a supervisor of 10 people at a restaurant, 3 people at a convenience store, whatever, and say, I'm gonna bet on the person's people skills. They can learn warehousing. Get them in there, get it done. We have had more success in that model to drive a culture change than most other diversity plays. Get early in career talent, infuse them in the operation, give them something that you think is a stretch assignment, and obviously stay close and make sure they're successful. Technology is absolutely critical. We all have heard of big data. We're all dealing with big data. The secret in my mind are small pilots. You know, the master plan is great, but how can you embrace cloud technology for an experiment here, try a vendor's product over here, and realize you could scrap it if necessary. You've got to, you know, Gartner has the concept of bimodal supply chain, bimodal IT. I think it's valid. You have these huge infrastructure things that need to have these massive investments, massive infrastructure support, but then you have to be nimble. You have to take technology bets, and you have to invest in people in different skill sets that can address both. Which brings me to my last slide to talk about innovation. I think, let me just take a sip here. I forgot to mention one of my roles at ITT Corporation was the global champion of innovation while I had 2 other full-time jobs. and did a lot of research work, a lot of work with leading thought leaders in innovation, senior executives at Google, all the way through Harvard, IMD, et cetera. And one of the most powerful lessons I learned is that innovation is a continuum in several ways. One way is that your culture isn't ready to flip a switch and be innovative many times. You have to infuse the culture with conversation around innovation to make people receptive to it. And you have to remember the first principle up here, that this is out to kill innovation. What are we in supply chain, what are we in operations all about? Reducing variation. We want things to be repeatable with no mistakes, reduce the variation, make it perfect. What's the enemy of repeatability? Change, something new. So the whole enterprise and backbone that's after repeatability and predictability is out to crush innovation at any turn. So you've got to find mechanisms to infuse innovation. Some of that starts with culture. Some of it starts with just basic continuous improvement. Up the game in continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is on the spectrum to innovation. You don't have to be net new to the world to be innovative, and you don't have to just move 1 inch to be continuous improvement. There's a whole spectrum along the way, and as leaders, you should embrace that spectrum. There's 3 basic principles around how to pursue innovation. After it's all said and done, you can do it as a center-led activity, whether it's by region, by country, by an organization, and you would have 6 projects, and you're going to fund them, and you're going to innovate, and that's great. The other way is to bet on innovators. In your company, you have people that you know have taken bets before and been successful. Double down. Give them more responsibility. Give them another project. That's a higher probability of success than betting on somebody that's not innovated before. And the last is to go back to that idea of culture. The more you can infuse the idea that taking small bets, having a little risk, it's okay to fail small, into your culture and talk about innovation, you'll be amazed that over 6, 12, 18 months, the cultural dynamics will start to change. But it's a leader's responsibility, because the average employee is not going to take the initiative. They have to feel it's a safe place to talk like that, to think like that, to put ideas forth like that without being shot. There's an old adage, if you're the squirrel that goes out in the clearing in the woods and you say something and you get shot, no other squirrels are going to go out in the middle of the clearing. So employees need to know it's safe to pursue some of these things in innovation. I think that this last phrase has stuck with me for about 7 or 8 years now. We had an innovation summit in China with some of the world thought leaders and about 100 people in 3 days. And I can go through all that content. I still have it on my hard drive. But the biggest thing I came away with is, in big, complex organizations, it's okay to think big, but start small and go fast. You gotta go fast. You can't let a 2-year project be the gating factor for how much you can digest. You can digest small things, go quickly, knock them off, and get them done. A couple examples, and then I'll get off the stage. Over my time, we did a price configurator. Ultimately, it could configure 500,000 different combinations of different parts to end product. But it started with 20. And we proved it out. We started with 1 customer, with 1 branch office. It was a way to get started. We started with an innovation lab where we started with 2 engineers for half-time. We grew it to 3 engineers half-time. Then it turned it to 4 engineers full-time. We roughly spent $1 million a year. And the number one output that we got out of the innovation lab was not revenue, and it was not product. It was the recognition that the company believed in innovation, and they were willing to invest in it, and people were talking about whether they could have an innovation lab. I think ultimately we sold a few things and we broke even, and it's still in existence in the last company, but it's about the conversation, about making small bets, letting people know that that's okay. In this environment, we're taking bets on cloud applications, letting people experiment with things. The biggest problem most of us have, if you go to the IT department, it's $6 million in 3 years before you can get your project completed. Find ways to not have to go through their funnel. find ways to adopt a cloud application. Now, obviously, the biggest issue is whether you have forward and backward linkages to the databases, et cetera. But we're starting things without those linkages, proving that they work, and then saying, OK, here's the cost justification for why we should create those linkages. Closing, I just say that it's a soup recipe. One supply chain doesn't fit all. One path to innovation doesn't fit all. One path to teamwork doesn't fit all. And as leaders, all of your jobs are to connect those dots and put that recipe together. If I can be of any help at any time, I'd welcome it. I'll be around for a little bit afterwards. I think we have a performance coming up, and I've enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.